Why do you feel pain when someone walks away, ignores you, or stops choosing you? And why does your mind keep going back to them even when you know they are not good for your peace? Have you ever stopped and asked yourself if you actually miss them, or if you are just addicted to the way they made you feel? Because the truth is uncomfortable, most people are not heartbroken, they are attached. And attachment is the silent chain that keeps you emotionally trapped long after everything is already over. And until you break that chain, you will keep suffering in ways you don't even understand. 1. The root of your pain is not people, it's attachment. You believe that people are the reason behind your pain, but if you look closely, you will begin to see that it is not their actions alone. It is the expectations you created in your own mind that caused the suffering, because you expected them to stay, to understand you, and to choose you in the way you imagined. When reality does not match those expectations, the mind creates resistance, and that resistance turns into emotional pain that feels very real and overwhelming. Buddhism teaches that pain begins the moment you demand that life should be different from what it is, and the more you resist reality, the more deeply you suffer inside. The moment you release that demand and allow things to be as they are, something shifts within you, and that shift is the beginning of true freedom, because your peace is no longer tied to how others behave or what outcomes you receive. 2. You are not attached to people, you are attached to how they make you feel. When you think you miss someone, what you are actually missing is not the person themselves, but the emotions they created inside you, such as the feeling of being valued, the attention they gave you, or the sense of comfort and validation that came from their presence. If you look honestly, it is not their face or their words that your mind keeps replaying. It is how you felt when you were with them, because those moments made you feel important, seen, and emotionally secure. This is why even when someone is no longer in your life, the feeling they gave you still pulls you back, because your mind has linked that person with a certain emotional state that you now believe you cannot access without them. This realization changes everything, because it shows you that what you are chasing is not the person, but a feeling that you have unknowingly attached to them over time. And the more you repeat this pattern, the more dependent you become on others to feel complete. Once you understand this clearly, you begin to see that your dependence is not on them as individuals, but on the emotional experience they provided. And this is where your power returns, because anything that is based on a feeling can be slowly rebuilt within you through your own thoughts, your own habits, and your own self-awareness. As you start to create your own sense of value, peace, and emotional stability from within, the intensity of that attachment begins to fade, not because the person mattered less, but because you no longer rely on them to feel whole. This awareness slowly breaks the illusion that you need others to feel complete, and it opens the door to a deeper kind of independence where your emotional state becomes steady, self-created, and no longer controlled by external sources. 3. The more you need someone, the more power you give them. Dependence creates a hidden form of weakness that most people don't notice at first, because it feels natural to want connection, attention, and support. But the moment your happiness starts depending on someone else, you slowly begin to lose control over your own emotional state. When you need someone to reply, to care, or to act a certain way for you to feel okay, your peace becomes unstable, and your mind starts waiting, checking, and reacting to everything they do or don't do. This is where the shift happens, because without realizing it, you are giving them control over your mood, your energy, and even your sense of self-worth. And the more you rely on them, the more power they have over how you feel. A simple delay in their response can create anxiety. A small change in their behavior can create overthinking, and suddenly your entire day is affected by something that is completely outside your control. But the moment you reduce that need and start building your emotional strength from within, everything begins to change, because now you are no longer reacting to every small action, and your mind becomes calmer and more stable. You still connect with people, but you are no longer dependent on them to feel complete, and this is where real strength begins, because nothing can be taken from you when you are not relying on it to feel whole, and your peace becomes something that stays with you, no matter what others do. 4. Detachment is not coldness, it is emotional mastery. Most people misunderstand detachment because they confuse it with becoming distant, uncaring, or emotionally numb. But true detachment is not about shutting down your feelings or avoiding connection. It is about developing a level of inner stability, where your emotions no longer control you, and external situations no longer shake your peace. You still feel everything, you still care, and you still love. But the difference is that you are no longer controlled by those feelings in a way that makes you lose yourself. Instead of reacting impulsively, you begin to respond with awareness, and instead of being pulled in every direction by people's actions, you remain centered within yourself. Emotional mastery means that you are fully aware of what you feel, but you are not overwhelmed by it. And this awareness creates a gap between what happens outside and how you respond inside. For example, when someone ignores you, instead of immediately feeling rejected or anxious, you notice the feeling, understand it, and allow it to pass without letting it define your state of mind. When someone disappoints you, you do not collapse emotionally or start chasing for answers. You accept what is in front of you and protect your inner peace instead of sacrificing it. This does not make you weak or passive. It makes you stronger because you are no longer reacting from emotional dependency, but from clarity and control. Detachment also allows you to love in a healthier and more balanced way, because you are no longer trying to control people or expecting them to complete you. You give your time, your attention, and your energy freely, but you do not attach your identity or your happiness to how those things are received. This creates relationships that are based on choice rather than need, and when there is no need, there is no fear of loss controlling your behavior. You are able to walk away from what disturbs your peace, not because you do not care, but because you respect yourself enough to not stay in situations that drain you emotionally. As you continue to practice this, your mind becomes calmer, your reactions become slower and more thoughtful, and your presence becomes stronger because you are no longer easily shaken. People may even notice this shift in you, because where you once reacted quickly, you now remain composed, and where you once overthought everything, you now observe without losing control. This is what true detachment looks like. It is not the absence of emotion, but the presence of control. And once you reach this state, you realize that emotional mastery is not about changing the world around you, but about mastering what happens within you, regardless of the world outside. 5. Expectations are the silent cause of suffering. Every expectation you create becomes an invisible rule in your mind about how life should unfold. And without even realizing it, you begin to build a quiet agreement with the world that says people should act a certain way, situations should go according to your plans, and outcomes should match what you imagined. These expectations often feel normal because they are shaped by your desires, your past experiences, and even the way you think relationships are supposed to work. But the problem is that reality does not follow the script you create in your head. When things don't go the way you expected, the mind reacts with disappointment, frustration, or even pain, not because something terrible actually happened, but because what happened did not match what you believed should have happened. This is where suffering quietly begins, because you are no longer experiencing life as it is. You are comparing it to an imagined version of how it should be, and that gap between expectation and reality is what creates emotional discomfort. For example, You expect someone to reply quickly because you would do the same. You expect someone to understand you without explanation because you believe they should. Or you expect people to treat you with the same energy you give them, and when these things don't happen, it feels like rejection or disrespect. But in truth, it is not always about them failing you. It is about your expectations not being met, and the mind interpreting that as something personal. The more expectations you carry, the more sensitive you become to every small change in behavior, every delay, every difference in how others act. And this makes your emotional state fragile because it is constantly reacting to whether reality is meeting your internal conditions. This is why people often feel hurt over things that may seem small on the surface, because the pain is not just about the event itself. It is about the meaning they attach to it through their expectations. When you begin to see this clearly, you realize that a large part of your suffering is self-created, not intentionally, but through patterns of thinking that you have never questioned before. Letting go of expectations does not mean you stop having standards or that you accept everything blindly. It simply means you stop forcing reality to match your imagination and start seeing things as they are without adding extra emotional weight to them. When you reduce expectations, you reduce the chances of feeling disappointed because you are no longer holding life to a rigid standard that it was never meant to follow. You begin to observe people for who they truly are instead of who you want them to be, and this clarity allows you to make better decisions without being driven by emotional reactions. As this understanding deepens, something powerful begins to happen within you because you start to feel lighter, calmer, and less affected by the ups and downs of daily interactions. You no longer take everything personally, you no longer overthink every small situation, and you no longer feel the constant pressure of needing things to go your way. Instead, you develop a quiet acceptance that allows you to move through life with more peace and less resistance. This is where real freedom begins, not when everything goes perfectly, but when you are no longer disturbed by the fact that it doesn't, and your peace becomes something that is not dependent on outcomes, but rooted in your ability to accept whatever comes without losing yourself. 6. Learn to let go, not because you don't care, but because you do. Letting go is one of the most misunderstood and most difficult actions a person can take, because the mind naturally believes that holding on is a sign of strength, while releasing is a sign of weakness. But the truth is often the opposite, because what you hold on to is not always helping you, and in many cases, it is the very thing that is slowly draining your energy, your peace, and your sense of self. When you continue to hold on to people, memories, expectations, or situations that are no longer aligned with your well-being, you create a constant internal tension that keeps your mind trapped in a cycle of overthinking, emotional attachment, and silent suffering that does not easily go away. Most people do not hold on because they are strong. They hold on because they are afraid of losing what once made them feel good, afraid of facing emptiness, and afraid of accepting that something has changed or ended. And this fear creates a resistance that keeps them stuck in the past, even when the present is clearly showing them that it is time to move forward. The mind keeps replaying moments, imagining different outcomes, and searching for answers that may never come. And this constant mental activity creates an illusion that holding on will somehow fix what is already gone. But in reality, it only keeps the wound open for longer than necessary. Letting go, on the other hand, requires a different kind of strength, a strength that comes from clarity rather than emotion, because you begin to see that what you are holding on to is not bringing you peace, it is taking it away from you. And once you recognize this, the idea of holding on no longer feels like loyalty or love. It feels like self-neglect. You begin to understand that caring about something does not mean you must keep it in your life forever, and that sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for yourself is to release what is no longer serving your growth, even if it once meant everything to you. There is also a deeper truth behind letting go, and that is the realization that nothing in life is meant to be permanent. Everything changes, everything evolves, and everything eventually comes to an end in one form or another. And when you resist this natural flow, you create unnecessary suffering for yourself. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering, not because connection is wrong, but because the expectation of permanence in an impermanent world creates pain. When you accept that things are temporary, you begin to appreciate them without clinging to them, and this changes the way you experience both presence and loss. Letting go does not mean you forget what happened or pretend that it did not matter. It simply means you stop allowing it to control your present state of mind, and you release the emotional weight that you have been carrying for far too long. You can still value the memories, learn from the experiences, and acknowledge the emotions that were real, but you no longer allow those things to define your current identity or limit your ability to move forward. This is an important shift because it transforms letting go from something painful into something freeing, where you are not losing something, you are gaining space within yourself. Another reason letting go feels so difficult is because the mind is attached not only to what was real, but also to what could have been, and this imagined version of reality often feels even stronger than the actual experience. You may find yourself holding on to possibilities, future scenarios, or the idea that things could still change, and this keeps you emotionally invested in something that is no longer present. This attachment to potential is powerful because it gives you hope, but when that hope is not grounded in reality, it becomes a source of prolonged suffering rather than motivation. Letting go in this situation means accepting not only what has happened, but also what will not happen. And this level of acceptance requires honesty with yourself that many people avoid. As you begin to practice letting go, you will notice that your mind slowly becomes quieter, because it is no longer constantly revisiting the same thoughts or trying to solve problems that no longer exist in the present moment. Your energy returns to you, your focus becomes clearer, and your emotional state becomes more stable because you are no longer tied to something outside of your control. This does not happen instantly. It is a gradual process where you consciously choose to release your grip each time your mind tries to hold on again, and over time, this practice builds a sense of inner strength that feels natural and grounded. Letting go is also deeply connected to self-respect, because when you truly value yourself, you begin to question why you are holding on to something that is causing you pain and whether it is worth sacrificing your peace for it. This question alone can shift your perspective because it brings your focus back to what matters most: your well-being, your growth, and your inner stability. You begin to see that holding on is not always an act of love, and that sometimes it is an act of fear or habit that you have not yet challenged. When you choose to let go from a place of self-respect, it feels less like loss and more like a decision to protect your own peace. There is also a quiet freedom that comes with letting go, a sense of lightness that is difficult to describe until you experience it for yourself, because you realize how much weight you were carrying without even being fully aware of it. When that weight is released, even partially, you feel a shift in your body, your thoughts, and your emotions. And this shift reminds you that peace was always available to you, but it was being blocked by what you were holding on to. This is why letting go is not about losing something valuable. It is about removing what was standing in the way of your peace. In the end, letting go is not about becoming indifferent or disconnected. It is about becoming wise enough to understand what deserves your energy and what does not, and having the strength to act on that understanding without being controlled by fear or attachment. It is a process of choosing yourself again and again, choosing your peace over your past, choosing clarity over confusion, and choosing growth over comfort. When you reach this point, you begin to see that letting go was never about giving something up. It was about returning to yourself, and that return is where true freedom begins. 7. Your peace is your responsibility, not theirs. At the deepest level of your life, there is a truth that many people avoid because it feels uncomfortable at first, and that truth is that no one is responsible for your inner peace except you. Not the people you love, not the ones who hurt you, not the ones who ignored you, and not even the circumstances you find yourself in. Because while all of these things can influence how you feel, they do not have the final authority over your state of mind unless you give it to them. Most people spend years, sometimes even their entire lives, believing that their happiness depends on how others treat them, how situations unfold, or how closely reality matches their expectations. And without realizing it, they hand over control of their emotional world to things that are constantly changing and completely outside their control. This is why peace feels unstable for so many people, because it is built on conditions that are never guaranteed, such as someone's attention, someone's approval, or the hope that everything will go according to plan. When those conditions are met, they feel good, but when they are not, their peace disappears instantly, leaving them confused, frustrated, and emotionally drained. What they don't realize is that the problem is not life itself, but where they have placed the responsibility for their happiness. Because the moment you place your peace in the hands of others, you also give them the power to take it away, whether they intend to or not. Taking responsibility for your peace does not mean that life will suddenly become easy or that people will never affect you again. It means that you stop expecting the outside world to fix what must be managed within. It means you begin to understand your thoughts, your reactions, and your emotional patterns. And instead of blaming others for how you feel, you start asking yourself a more powerful question, which is, why am I reacting this way? And what part of me is creating this response? This shift in thinking is not about blaming yourself. It is about empowering yourself, because once you understand your inner world, you gain the ability to change how you experience the outer world. One of the biggest changes that happens when you take responsibility for your peace is that you stop chasing people for validation, attention, or emotional security, because you realize that anything you chase outside of yourself can never give you lasting stability. You begin to see that when you rely on someone else to make you feel worthy, you are placing your self-worth in a position where it can be easily shaken, and this creates a cycle where you are constantly seeking reassurance instead of building confidence from within. As you break this cycle, you start to develop a sense of self that is not dependent on how others see you, and this creates a deeper kind of confidence that is quiet, stable, and not easily disturbed. Another important part of this responsibility is learning to observe your thoughts without immediately believing them, because not every thought that enters your mind is true or useful. Many of your reactions come from patterns that were formed in the past, from experiences, fears, or beliefs that you have carried with you over time. And when something triggers those patterns, your mind reacts automatically without you even realizing it. By becoming aware of this process, you create a space between the situation and your reaction, and in that space, you have the ability to choose how you respond instead of simply reacting out of habit. This is where real control begins, not in controlling the world, but in understanding your response to it. Taking responsibility for your peace also means accepting that people will not always behave the way you want them to, and that expecting them to do so will only create frustration and disappointment. Instead of trying to control their actions, you begin to focus on how you choose to respond to them, and this shift gives you a sense of stability that does not depend on their behavior. You can still set boundaries, you can still walk away from what does not serve you, but you do it from a place of clarity rather than emotional reaction, and this makes your decisions stronger and more aligned with your well-being. As you continue to practice this, your emotional state becomes less reactive and more grounded, because you are no longer depending on external situations to feel okay. You stop taking everything personally, you stop overanalyzing every small detail, and you stop allowing temporary situations to have a permanent impact on your state of mind. This does not mean you become indifferent. It means you become stable, and that stability allows you to move through life with a sense of calm that is not easily shaken by what happens around you. There is also a deep sense of freedom that comes from knowing that your peace is yours to protect, because it shifts your focus from trying to change others to strengthening yourself. Instead of asking why people are the way they are, you begin to focus on who you are becoming, and this focus creates growth instead of frustration. You begin to invest your energy into your own thoughts, your own habits, and your own mindset. And over time, this investment builds a strong inner foundation that supports you in every situation you face. Taking responsibility for your peace does not mean you isolate yourself or avoid relationships. It means you enter them with awareness, with balance, and without losing yourself in the process. You can connect with others, care about them, and share experiences with them, but you no longer depend on them to define your emotional state. This creates healthier relationships because they are no longer based on need or fear, but on choice and mutual respect. And when something changes or ends, you are able to handle it without losing your sense of stability. Over time, this way of living becomes natural, and you begin to notice that the things that once disturbed you no longer have the same effect, because you have built a level of awareness and control that protects your inner peace. You become less reactive, more patient, and more clear in how you see situations, and this clarity allows you to navigate life with confidence instead of confusion. You no longer feel like a victim of circumstances, because you understand that while you cannot control everything that happens, you can always influence how you experience it. In the end, taking responsibility for your peace is one of the most powerful decisions you can make, because it shifts your life from being controlled by external forces to being guided by your own awareness and understanding. It is not a one-time realization, but a continuous practice of choosing calm over reaction, clarity over confusion, and self-awareness over blame. As you continue this practice, you begin to realize that your peace was never something you had to find in others. It was something you had to protect within yourself. And once you truly understand this, you stop chasing, you stop depending, and you finally experience a level of freedom that cannot be taken away by anyone or anything. 8. The illusion of control is what keeps you attached. One of the deepest reasons you struggle to detach is not because you care too much, but because you believe, often without realizing it, that you can control how things turn out, how people behave, and how life unfolds around you. And this belief creates a silent attachment that keeps your mind constantly engaged, constantly thinking, and constantly trying to manage outcomes that were never fully in your control to begin with. You may not consciously say to yourself that you want to control everything, but your thoughts reveal it through overthinking, worrying, replaying conversations, and imagining different scenarios, all in an attempt to shape reality into something that feels safe, predictable, and aligned with your desires. The mind creates this illusion of control as a way to protect you, because uncertainty feels uncomfortable, and not knowing what will happen can create anxiety. So instead of accepting that uncertainty is a natural part of life, the mind tries to reduce it by analyzing everything, predicting outcomes, and holding on to people or situations in the hope that it can influence what happens next. But this effort, no matter how intense it becomes, does not actually give you control. It only gives you the feeling that you are doing something, while in reality, it keeps you trapped in a cycle of mental activity that drains your energy without changing the outcome. Think about how often you replay a conversation in your mind, imagining what you could have said differently, or how often you think about someone's behavior, trying to understand why they acted a certain way, as if finding the answer will somehow give you control over how they act in the future. This is the illusion at work, because it convinces you that if you think enough, analyze enough, or hold on tightly enough, you can influence something that is ultimately outside of your control. The more you believe this, the more attached you become, because your mind refuses to let go of something it thinks it can still manage or fix. Attachment grows stronger when control feels possible, even if it is not real, and this is why it becomes so difficult to detach from people or situations that feel unresolved, because your mind keeps telling you that there is still something you can do, something you can say, or something you can figure out that will change the outcome. This creates a loop where you are emotionally invested not only in what is happening, but in the idea that you can influence what will happen. And this loop keeps you connected to something long after it has already moved beyond your control. Buddhism teaches a powerful principle that directly challenges this illusion, which is the understanding that while you can control your actions, your thoughts, and your intentions, you cannot control the results of those actions or the behavior of others. And once you truly accept this, a significant amount of mental pressure begins to dissolve. You no longer feel the need to control every detail. You no longer feel responsible for outcomes that are not yours to carry, and you begin to experience a sense of relief that comes from letting life unfold without trying to force it into a specific shape. Letting go of control does not mean you stop caring about your life or your goals. It means you focus on what is actually within your control and release what is not, and this shift creates a more balanced and grounded way of living. You still take action, you still make decisions, and you still move forward with intention, but you are no longer attached to a specific result, and this reduces the emotional intensity that often comes with expectations and attachment. When things go your way, you appreciate them, and when they don't, you accept them without losing your stability, because your peace is no longer tied to the outcome. Another important aspect of this illusion is the need for closure, because the mind often believes that it needs a clear explanation, a final answer, or a perfect ending in order to move on. And when it does not get that, it keeps searching, keeps thinking, and keeps holding on in the hope that one day everything will make sense. But the truth is that not everything in life will come with closure. Not every question will be answered, and not every situation will resolve in a way that feels complete. And waiting for that closure can keep you attached for far longer than necessary. Learning to accept that some things will remain unanswered is a key part of letting go of control, because it allows you to move forward without needing everything to be perfectly understood. As you begin to release this illusion, you will notice a shift in how your mind operates, because it becomes less restless, less focused on controlling every detail, and more present in the moment. You start to realize that much of your stress was coming from trying to manage things that were never yours to manage, and this realization creates a sense of lightness that feels both freeing and unfamiliar at first. You may still have moments where your mind tries to regain control, where it starts overthinking or worrying again, but with awareness, you can recognize this pattern and gently bring yourself back to what is real instead of what you are trying to control. This process takes practice because the habit of control is deeply rooted in the way most people think, but over time, it becomes easier to let go, easier to trust the flow of life, and easier to accept things as they are without adding unnecessary resistance. You begin to see that life does not need to be controlled in order to be lived fully, and that, in many cases, the more you try to control it, the more you limit your ability to experience it with openness and clarity. In the end, releasing the illusion of control is not about giving up. It is about understanding the difference between what you can influence and what you cannot, and choosing to place your energy where it actually makes a difference. It is about trusting that not everything needs to be forced, fixed, or figured out immediately, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to step back, let go, and allow life to unfold without trying to control every outcome. When you reach this point, attachment begins to lose its grip on you, because your mind is no longer trying to hold on to something it believes it can control, and in that release, you find a deeper sense of peace that is not dependent on how things turn out, but on your ability to remain steady regardless of what happens. 9. Nothing is truly yours, and that is why you must learn to detach. One of the deepest truths that Buddhism teaches, and one that is often difficult to accept at first, is that nothing you experience in this life is truly yours in the permanent sense, and the more you resist this truth, the more you suffer, because you continue trying to hold on to things that were never meant to stay forever. Everything you see around you, every person, every relationship, every moment, every emotion, and even your own identity is constantly changing, shifting, and evolving. Yet the mind creates the illusion that these things belong to you and should remain the way they are. This illusion of ownership is what creates attachment, because once you believe something is yours, you begin to fear losing it, and that fear quietly controls your thoughts, your actions, and your emotional state. Think about how often you say, "My life, my person, my success," or "my happiness," as if these things are fixed and permanent. But if you observe closely, you will realize that everything you call yours is influenced by factors outside your control and can change at any moment. People enter your life and leave, situations improve and collapse, emotions rise and fall, and even your own thoughts and beliefs change over time, yet the mind continues to hold on to the idea that these things should remain stable because they feel familiar and comfortable. This is where attachment becomes strong, because it is not just about enjoying something, it is about believing that it must stay the same for you to feel secure. The problem with this belief is that it goes against the natural flow of life, because life itself is built on impermanence, and everything you experience is temporary by nature. When you try to make temporary things permanent in your mind, you create a constant tension between what is real and what you want to be real, and this tension becomes the source of your suffering. You begin to worry about losing what you have, you feel anxious when things start to change, and you struggle to accept endings because they challenge the idea that something was ever truly yours to keep. Detachment begins when you understand that nothing is truly yours to possess, but everything is yours to experience, and this shift in perspective changes the way you interact with life. Instead of trying to hold on to people or moments, you begin to appreciate them while they are present, without building your identity or your happiness around them. You allow things to come into your life and leave when their time is over, without resisting the process, and this creates a sense of peace that is not dependent on things staying the same. This does not mean you stop caring, it means you stop clinging, and there is a big difference between the two. When you cling to something, you create fear, fear of loss, fear of change, and fear of uncertainty. And this fear makes your experience heavy and stressful because you are constantly trying to protect something that cannot be protected from change. But when you detach, you remove that fear because you accept that change is inevitable, and instead of fighting it, you move with it. You begin to see that nothing needs to be controlled or held tightly in order to be meaningful, and that sometimes the beauty of something comes from its temporary nature, not from its permanence. Another important realization that comes with this understanding is that even your identity is not as fixed as you think it is, because the person you are today is not the same person you were years ago, and the person you will become in the future will also be different. Your thoughts, your beliefs, your preferences, and your understanding of the world are constantly evolving. Yet the mind tries to create a solid sense of self that it can hold on to. This attachment to identity can also create suffering, because when life challenges the way you see yourself, you may resist change in order to protect that identity, even if changing would lead to growth. When you accept that even your identity is fluid, you become more open to growth, more flexible in your thinking, and less afraid of change because you are no longer trying to hold on to a fixed version of yourself. This allows you to adapt to life more easily, to learn from your experiences, and to move forward without being held back by who you used to be. It creates a sense of freedom that comes from not needing to protect an image, a role, or a version of yourself that may no longer serve you. Detachment also changes the way you experience loss, because when you understand that nothing was truly yours to begin with, loss becomes a transition rather than a complete destruction. You still feel the absence, you still process the emotions, but you do not feel as if something essential has been taken away from you, because you recognize that what you experienced was always temporary. This perspective does not remove pain completely, but it reduces the suffering that comes from resisting reality and wishing things could have stayed the same. As you continue to practice this understanding, you begin to live with a different kind of awareness, where you are fully present in your experiences, but not controlled by them. You enjoy moments without fearing their end, you connect with people without trying to possess them, and you move through life with a sense of lightness that comes from not carrying the weight of attachment. This does not make life empty or meaningless. It actually makes it richer, because you are able to experience things more deeply without the fear of losing them overshadowing your experience. This way of living also creates a deeper form of gratitude, because when you know that nothing is guaranteed to stay, you begin to appreciate what you have in the present moment without taking it for granted. You stop postponing your appreciation for later, and you start recognizing the value of what is here now, because you understand that it will not always be the same. This awareness brings a quiet sense of fulfillment that is not based on ownership, but on presence and acceptance. In the end, realizing that nothing is truly yours is not a negative or depressing idea. It is a freeing one, because it releases you from the constant fear of loss and the need to control everything around you. It allows you to move through life with openness, flexibility, and peace, knowing that you are here to experience, to learn, and to grow, not to possess or control. When you fully understand this, attachment begins to lose its grip on you, and in that release, you discover a kind of freedom that is not dependent on what you have, but on your ability to let go and remain at peace regardless of what comes and goes. 10. True freedom begins when you stop needing anything from anyone. There comes a point in life where you begin to realize that much of your emotional struggle has not come from what happened to you, but from what you needed from others in order to feel okay. And this realization can feel both uncomfortable and liberating at the same time, because it forces you to face a truth that most people spend their lives avoiding. The truth is that the more you depend on people for validation, attention, approval, or emotional security, the more unstable your inner world becomes, because you are placing your peace in something that is constantly changing and never fully under your control. From a young age, you are conditioned to seek approval, to fit in, to be accepted, and to feel valued by others. And while connection is a natural and important part of life, the problem begins when that need for connection turns into emotional dependence, where your sense of worth and your ability to feel at peace becomes tied to how others treat you. You begin to measure your value based on their responses, their attention, and their behavior, and without realizing it, you give them silent authority over how you feel about yourself. This is why a simple change in someone's attitude can affect you so deeply, because your mind has linked their behavior to your sense of self-worth. When you start needing something from someone, whether it is their time, their validation, their reassurance, or their presence, you create an invisible expectation, and that expectation becomes a source of pressure that quietly shapes your emotions. If they meet that expectation, you feel good, but if they don't, you feel disappointed, anxious, or even rejected, and this creates a cycle where your emotional state is constantly shifting based on something that is not fully in your control. Over time, this cycle becomes exhausting because you are always reacting instead of being at peace, always waiting instead of being stable, and always depending instead of being complete within yourself. True freedom begins the moment you start breaking this cycle, and that does not mean you stop connecting with people or that you isolate yourself from the world. It means you change the way you relate to others by removing the need that you have attached to them. You begin to understand that people can add value to your life, but they should not be the source of your value, and this shift creates a sense of independence that is both powerful and deeply calming. You still appreciate people, you still enjoy their presence, but you are no longer relying on them to feel whole, and this changes everything about how you experience relationships. When you no longer need anything from anyone, your interactions become more genuine because they are no longer driven by expectation or fear of loss. You are not trying to hold on to people, you are not trying to control how they feel about you, and you are not trying to extract something from every interaction to validate yourself. Instead, you show up as you are, you give what you can, and you allow things to unfold naturally without forcing them to meet your internal demands. This creates a sense of ease in your relationships that is difficult to achieve when you are operating from a place of need. Another powerful shift that happens when you let go of need is that you stop tolerating things that disturb your peace, because you are no longer afraid of losing something you depend on. When you need someone, you may ignore red flags, accept behavior that does not align with your values, or stay in situations that drain you emotionally, simply because you fear the loss of what they provide. But when that need disappears, you begin to see things more clearly, and you make decisions based on what is right for you, rather than what you are afraid to lose. This creates stronger boundaries, better choices, and a deeper sense of self-respect. Letting go of need also changes the way you experience loneliness, because what most people call loneliness is often not the absence of people, but the absence of emotional dependence being fulfilled. When you are used to relying on others for your sense of comfort or validation, being alone can feel uncomfortable because your usual source of emotional support is no longer there. But as you build your inner stability, you begin to experience solitude differently, not as something empty, but as something peaceful, where you are able to sit with yourself without feeling the need to escape or distract yourself. This is where you start to discover that being alone does not mean being incomplete. It means being whole on your own. As this understanding deepens, your mind becomes quieter because it is no longer constantly searching for something outside of you to feel okay. You stop overanalyzing every interaction. You stop questioning your worth based on how others behave, and you stop chasing approval that was never meant to define you. Instead, you develop a steady sense of self that remains consistent, regardless of what is happening around you, and this consistency creates a level of peace that is not easily disturbed. It is important to understand that this kind of freedom does not come from suppressing your emotions or pretending that you do not care. It comes from understanding yourself so deeply that you no longer need external sources to complete you. You still feel, you still connect, and you still care, but your emotional state is no longer dependent on those connections in a way that makes you lose yourself. This balance allows you to experience life fully without becoming attached to outcomes that you cannot control. Over time, you begin to notice that the things that once affected you deeply no longer have the same impact because you have removed the need that was giving them power over you. You become less reactive, more composed, and more focused on your own growth rather than on how others perceive or treat you. This shift not only improves your inner peace, but also changes the way others see you, because when you are not seeking validation, you naturally become more confident, more grounded, and more difficult to influence in a negative way. In the end, true freedom is not about having everything you want. It is about not needing anything to feel complete. And this freedom allows you to move through life with a sense of calm, clarity, and strength that cannot be taken away from you. When you stop needing people to behave a certain way, when you stop needing outcomes to match your expectations, and when you stop needing external validation to feel worthy, you reach a point where your peace becomes stable, your mind becomes clear, and your life becomes simpler. This is the moment where attachment begins to dissolve completely, and in its place, you find a deeper, more lasting form of freedom that comes not from what you have, but from who you have become within yourself. 11. The more you observe your mind, the less power it has over you. One of the most powerful shifts you can make on the path of detachment is learning to observe your mind instead of immediately reacting to it, because most of your suffering does not come directly from what happens outside of you. It comes from the thoughts, interpretations, and stories your mind creates in response to those situations. The problem is that most people are so identified with their thoughts that they believe everything their mind tells them without question. And this creates a cycle where every emotion feels real, every assumption feels true, and every reaction feels justified, even when it is not helping them. From the moment something happens, your mind begins to interpret it, analyze it, and attach meaning to it, often within seconds. And these interpretations are usually influenced by your past experiences, your fears, your insecurities, and your expectations. For example, if someone does not reply to your message, your mind may immediately jump to conclusions such as they are ignoring you, they do not care about you, or you are not important to them, even though there could be many other explanations that have nothing to do with you. But because you are not aware of this process, you accept these thoughts as reality, and your emotions begin to follow, creating anxiety, frustration, or sadness based on something that may not even be true. This is where observation becomes powerful, because the moment you step back and notice your thoughts instead of becoming them, you create a distance between you and your mental patterns, and in that distance, you begin to see things more clearly. You realize that your thoughts are not facts, they are simply interpretations, and just because a thought appears in your mind does not mean it deserves your attention or belief. This awareness alone begins to weaken the automatic control your mind has over you, because you are no longer reacting instantly to everything that arises. Observation does not mean you try to stop your thoughts or force your mind to be silent, because that usually creates more resistance. It means you allow your thoughts to appear without immediately engaging with them, judging them, or trying to change them. You simply notice them, understand them, and let them pass without giving them unnecessary importance. Over time, this practice creates a sense of calm because your mind is no longer constantly pulling you into emotional reactions that drain your energy. As you continue to observe your mind, you start to recognize patterns that you may have never noticed before, such as how often you overthink, how quickly you assume the worst, or how easily you become attached to certain outcomes. You begin to see that many of your reactions are not based on the present moment, but on past experiences that are influencing how you interpret what is happening now. This realization is important because it shows you that your mind is not always responding to reality. It is responding to its own conditioning, and once you see this clearly, you begin to question whether your reactions are truly necessary. Another important aspect of observation is understanding that emotions are temporary, even though they may feel intense in the moment, and when you observe them without reacting immediately, you give them space to rise and fall naturally without turning them into something bigger than they need to be. For example, if you feel anger or sadness, instead of acting on it or trying to suppress it, you simply notice it, feel it, and allow it to pass, without letting it control your actions. This creates a sense of emotional stability because you are no longer being driven by every feeling that arises. This practice also helps you detach from the need to control every situation, because as you observe your mind, you begin to see how much of your desire for control comes from fear, fear of uncertainty, fear of loss, and fear of not being able to handle what happens next. When you become aware of this, you start to understand that trying to control everything is not actually solving the problem. It is just a reaction to the discomfort of not knowing, and once you accept that uncertainty is a natural part of life, your need to control begins to decrease. As your awareness grows, you also become more intentional in how you respond to situations, because instead of reacting automatically, you take a moment to consider what is actually happening and what response aligns with your peace. This pause between stimulus and response is where your power lies, because it allows you to choose clarity over impulse, calm over reaction, and understanding over assumption. Over time, this becomes a habit, and your mind begins to settle into a more balanced state where it is not constantly jumping from one thought to another without awareness. The more you observe your mind, the less control it has over you, because you are no longer unconsciously following every thought or emotion that arises. You begin to see that your mind is a tool, not your identity, and that you have the ability to use it without being controlled by it. This creates a sense of freedom that is deeply connected to detachment, because when you are not attached to your thoughts, you are not as easily affected by them, and your inner peace becomes more stable. This does not mean your mind will become completely silent, or that you will never experience negative thoughts again, because the mind will always produce thoughts. That is its nature. But what changes is your relationship with those thoughts. You no longer see them as commands that must be followed, but as temporary mental events that come and go without defining who you are. This shift allows you to move through life with more clarity, less emotional disturbance, and a greater sense of control over how you experience each moment. In the end, observing your mind is one of the most important steps in learning to detach, because it allows you to see the difference between what is happening and what your mind is saying about what is happening. And this distinction gives you the ability to respond to life with awareness, instead of being controlled by unconscious patterns. When you reach this level of understanding, your thoughts lose their ability to disturb you in the same way, and your peace becomes something that is not easily shaken, because it is no longer dependent on what your mind is doing, but on your ability to remain aware of it without losing yourself in it. 12. Detachment is not the end of love. It is the beginning of pure love. One of the biggest fears people have when they hear the idea of detachment is that it will make them cold, distant, or incapable of loving deeply, because they believe that attachment is what makes love strong and meaningful. But this belief is based on misunderstanding what love truly is. What most people call love is often mixed with need, expectation, control, and fear of loss. And while it may feel intense, it is not always pure, because it is influenced by the desire to receive something in return. Detachment does not destroy love. It removes everything that weakens it, and what remains is a form of connection that is far more stable, honest, and peaceful. When you are attached, your love is often conditional, even if you do not realize it, because it depends on how the other person behaves, how they treat you, and whether they meet your expectations. If they give you attention, you feel loved. If they pull away, you feel insecure. And this creates a constant emotional fluctuation that turns love into something unstable. You may find yourself overthinking their actions, questioning their feelings, and trying to control the relationship in subtle ways, not because you are a bad person, but because you are afraid of losing something that you believe you need in order to feel complete. This fear quietly shapes your behavior, and over time, it creates tension, pressure, and emotional exhaustion. Detachment changes this completely because it removes the need from your love, and when there is no need, there is no fear controlling your actions. You are no longer loving someone because you need them to make you feel a certain way. You are loving them because you genuinely care, and this creates a sense of freedom in the connection that allows both you and the other person to exist without pressure. You are not trying to hold on to them, you are not trying to control how they feel, and you are not attaching your happiness to their presence. Instead, you allow the relationship to exist naturally, without forcing it to meet your expectations. This kind of love is more stable because it is not dependent on constant reassurance or validation, and it allows you to remain emotionally balanced even when things change. If the person is present, you appreciate them, and if they are not, you do not lose yourself in the process. This does not mean you do not feel anything. It means your feelings are no longer tied to fear or dependency, and this creates a deeper sense of peace within the relationship. You are able to give without expecting, to care without controlling, and to connect without losing your sense of self. Another important aspect of detached love is that it allows you to see people clearly without projecting your expectations or desires onto them. When you are attached, you often see people not as they are, but as you want them to be, and this creates a gap between reality and your perception that can lead to disappointment. But when you detach, you begin to accept people for who they truly are, and this acceptance allows you to build connections that are based on reality rather than illusion. You no longer try to change them to fit your needs, and this reduces conflict and emotional tension. Detachment also strengthens your boundaries, because when you are not afraid of losing someone, you are more willing to walk away from situations that do not respect your peace or your values. You are no longer staying in relationships out of fear, loneliness, or emotional dependence. You are choosing them because they align with your well-being. This creates a healthier dynamic where both people are there by choice, not by need. And this kind of connection is much stronger because it is built on mutual respect rather than emotional attachment. It is also important to understand that detached love does not mean you avoid pain completely, because caring about someone will always involve some level of emotional risk. But what changes is how you experience that pain. Instead of feeling like your world is collapsing when something ends or changes, you feel the emotions without losing your sense of stability, because your identity and your peace are not tied to the relationship. You are able to process the experience, learn from it, and move forward without being stuck in a cycle of suffering. As you continue to develop this kind of love, you begin to notice that your relationships become more peaceful, more honest, and less complicated, because you are no longer bringing unnecessary expectations or fears into them. You communicate more clearly, you react less impulsively, and you allow space for both yourself and the other person to grow without feeling restricted. This creates a sense of harmony that is difficult to achieve when attachment is present, because attachment often brings control, insecurity, and emotional imbalance into the connection. Detached love also allows you to extend compassion not only to others but to yourself, because you are no longer judging your worth based on how others treat you or how relationships unfold. You begin to understand that your value is not determined by someone's ability to stay, to love you, or to meet your expectations, And this realization creates a deeper sense of self-acceptance. When you accept yourself fully, you no longer seek completion from others, and this removes the pressure that often distorts love into something heavy and demanding. Over time, you realize that detachment does not take anything away from love. It actually refines it, removing the fear, the need, and the control that once made it unstable, and leaving behind something that is lighter, freer, and more genuine. You are able to love without losing yourself, to connect without becoming dependent, and to care without being controlled by the outcome. This is what pure love looks like. Not something that binds you, but something that allows you to remain whole while sharing your life with others. In the end, detachment is not the absence of love. It is the transformation of love into its purest form, where it is no longer based on need or fear, but on understanding, respect, and genuine care. When you reach this level, you no longer see love as something you have to hold on to. You see it as something you can experience fully without attachment, and this allows you to move through relationships with a sense of peace that remains steady regardless of what happens. This is the beginning of true emotional freedom, where love no longer becomes a source of suffering, but a reflection of the stability and clarity you have built within yourself. At the end of all of this, detachment is not about becoming someone who feels nothing. It is about becoming someone who is no longer controlled by everything, and this is where your real power begins. You are not here to stop loving, you are not here to stop caring, and you are not here to disconnect from life. You are here to experience it without losing yourself in it, and that is a completely different way of living than what most people know. When you understand these lessons deeply, something shifts inside you, because you stop chasing people who do not choose you, you stop expecting things that are not guaranteed, and you stop depending on outcomes that were never in your control. And in that shift, your mind becomes quieter, your emotions become more stable, and your life becomes simpler. You begin to move with clarity instead of confusion, with calm instead of reaction, and with strength instead of emotional dependence. And this is where inner peace starts to feel natural rather than something you have to fight for. You start to realize that nothing outside of you was ever meant to complete you, and that everything you were searching for in others was something you needed to build within yourself. And once you do that, the need to hold on begins to fade. You can still connect with people, you can still enjoy moments, and you can still care deeply, but you no longer lose your identity, your peace, or your stability in the process, and that changes the way you experience everything. Detachment does not take anything valuable away from you. It removes what was disturbing you, and when that disturbance is gone, what remains is clarity, freedom, and a deep sense of calm that is not easily shaken by the outside world. You stop reacting to every small thing, you stop overthinking every situation, and you stop allowing temporary moments to control your permanent state of mind, and this creates a level of emotional strength that most people never reach. And the most important realization of all is this: your peace was never in people, it was never in situations, and it was never in outcomes. It was always within you, waiting for you to stop giving it away. The moment you take that peace back, the moment you stop placing it in things that change, is the moment you become truly free, because now nothing can disturb you in the same way again. So do not be afraid to let go. Do not be afraid to release what no longer serves you. And do not be afraid to stand on your own without depending on anyone to feel complete, because sometimes the moment you stop holding on to everything that hurts you is the exact moment your life begins to feel lighter, clearer, and more powerful than ever before. And that is the moment where detachment turns into true freedom.